solid videos. Really want to just try to start engaging our followers and folks who have supported us. As Rob and I and Vince have talked, one of the key elements of our mission has always been that of educating everybody what their rights are. In addition to the work, we try to do that through the work that we do. And often that really turns into us filing a brief and then putting something out, maybe say on Substack or somewhere else out there, kind of via email or in the ether, and you're kind of left to your own to really digest it. We might give you a paragraph or two. And so with all that, what we've wanted to do is start doing more frequent updates, more frequent podcasts type addresses, so that everyone, if you have questions, certainly don't hesitate to ping them in the comments. But today I think we really wanted to start this as a general overview of why Silent Majority Foundation was started, what its impetus was, kind of what was the rising of the need of it, and then kind of talk about some of our early cases and how those have impacted and still continue to impact everything that we're doing. So
this is, like I said, like Pete said, this is brand new. We're getting all the kinks worked out. So this is kind of exciting that we've got this new format and new capability. But it's time to really start connecting with our followers and supporters. And this is the format that we think we can reach out and get more traction with you. And the question that we always get is, what can I do to help? How do I be more active in my community? How do I make a change? And so this is what we are doing as a Silent Majority, what we're doing from the inside. And we're trying to give you that answer and that ability to feel like you're part of the community, you're part of the change. And we wanted to tell our story today so that you can see that it doesn't take anything amazing. All it takes is the desire to make a difference, and desire to make a difference in people around you, your community, your family. And really that's what started this. Is Pete and I were trying to make a difference in our own lives, and we were working out in my garage. Early 2020 hit, all the gyms shut down. He and I both had made New Year's resolutions to get in better shape, but without a gym, we couldn't do that. So we hobbled a gym together in my garage, and that's where we started this. And what would you say was the first instance or first interaction you had with somebody during 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, that got you thinking, I need to do something?
I don't know what the very first one was. There were several that kind of compounded into the moment, I guess you could say. But, for those who don't know, outside of the foundation, I sit on Pasco City Council, and I continually watched as these mom and pop businesses were trying to stand up when Lowe's and Walmart were open because they had a larger footprint. Yeah, anyone that shopped during those days, they knew that, two-way traffic, but dude, COVID, whether you're walking north and I'm walking south up and down the same aisle that's like 8 feet, so you're not 6 feet distance, because Lowe's has that larger footprint, you can quote unquote be spaced out. And watching to pilfer a term that has been used, equity, the inequity of this, again, one of our city council members here in Pasco owns a tool store, and his place was at risk. And, so just watching that, and then getting reach out from the public. Specifically, there was a guy at Shakey's Pizza where Liquor Cannabis Board came in and said, hey, we're going to shut you down for not forcing your patrons to wear masks. And then, Mossy Rock stood up, that small town, and they said, no, we're not going to enforce this. And then I remember wanting to bring something to the floor at the end of 2020 and bringing it in early 2021. And the mayor said to me, she and I have known each other for 5 years now and worked together on city council. Mr. Serrano, you're an attorney. Why don't you do something? And I think all of those really, and then just watching my kids suffer, I think that was the biggest So there wasn't a defining moment. It was all culminated.
So I think it was for me a combination of those things as well. I mean, obviously, I'm not sitting on city council, and I didn't have anybody coming up to me personally. But I saw many of I prefer to shop locally and at mom and pop shops. I think that's maybe it's a weird thing, but on the weekends I like to go and peruse through the small shops and see what they've got, rather than shop on Amazon. Even though the last few years have made me an Amazon shopper just because that was the only option. But seeing them suffer, hearing the stories from you, and then really my children, like you said, I would say lucky and blessed that my three older daughters were able to actually get into what's called a dual language program here in Pasco. My oldest daughter has been able to go through all the way through her 6th grade year in this dual language program. She's both fluent in, obviously in English, but in Spanish as well now, which I think is a huge blessing, and is going to carry throughout the rest of her life. She's going to have opportunities that she wouldn't have had otherwise. But my two younger daughters suffered through that shutdown of school, weren't able to keep up the workload that's required when you're learning a different language. The way the dual language program is set up is that you literally are immersed in that second language all day long in order for you to pick it up. And children are amazing in their adaptability to pick up a language or anything really, when they're forced to, or when their environment is skewed in that way. But through that year, I saw that both of my daughters not only didn't pick up the new language, they fell back so far in their schooling and in their learning and their social development. I couldn't stand by and do that, especially because those two did suffer to varying degrees from speech impediments. And so when they were trying to tell them that they had to wear a mask all day long and try and understand not only in a foreign language, but understand and read lips anywhere they went, I could see it just weighing on them. Emotions and stress levels that kids shouldn't ever have to go through. And I'm sure I'm just saying something that all you parents out there viewed and saw and experienced at the same time. So this isn't anything new to you, but that's, like I said earlier, this is what we decided to do because we had the same experiences that you all did. We just saw that we had certain talents and capabilities that we wanted to share with the world and make a difference.
But that also goes back to the kind of original question of, we're here to help answer that what can I do question, right? You and I saw our kids suffer, but there was also the compounding effect of hearing consistently the same message from local businesses, from people that saw the inequality in the treatment. So it wasn't just that our kids pushed us. Our kids probably were that final straw. But back to the what can I do, contact your local leaders. Say, hey, look, this is not working. Now I understand that a lot of people that we talk to have tried that and it's not been successful or fruitful. Probably fruitful is a better word there. But I think that too is important in looking for, it plays into the question of elections. It plays into the question of, how do you support someone who's actually doing the right thing for whether it's a city or a school board or county, right? When you have those folks who are like-minded, support them, send them the thank you letters, send them or the emails, and send them the inquiries. Hey, how do we achieve X, Y, and Z? And it might be another major social issue like a pandemic or something of that nature, or you see, some other issue that's pervasive, reach out and seek that assistance. So I think that's one thing that people can do is, be vocal. We talked about this, go to the meetings and, not just at the global meeting, but also in the one-on-one settings.
So here's a question for you being an elected official. I know this has stopped me in the past. If your elected official that you're wanting to reach out to is on the other side of the aisle, right? Whatever side of the aisle may be, and you don't feel like your voice is being heard. So if a constituent reached out to you that you happen to know where their leaning is based on the question they're asking or the things they're demanding, are you likely to respond to that constituent? What do you think the likelihood is that you're going to get anything done if it's someone that's opposed to your own personal views?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can answer for myself, and then I can answer for what I hear about other elected officials, and I think they're two different answers. I do my best to respond to people even when I know I disagree. Some call me out. Some call me out for decisions that were made by the body of the council, and I voted against it or for it, right? Like, I voted the opposite way. I got an email about that this morning. It's like, hey, you guys are going to ruin the city of Pasco for bringing in marijuana retail, the cannabis retail. And it's like, if you haven't paid attention for the past year and a half, I vocally oppose that, right? And so, yeah, at some point when I get around to it, I'll respond to that email and do my best to at least let that person know that they've been heard. And hey, look, there's more to it than just like what happened on Monday night, right? Like, there's a backstory. I'm not going to give a novel, but I'll give some insight. And that might continue with the dialogue down the road. I don't know. Then that's how I handle that. And there are times where I blow people off because I know no matter what I say, it's not going to change their anger towards something that I either didn't do, or I wasn't even part of. Right. Hey, fix traffic here. And it's like, we've got a budget, and that's 2 years down the road, and 2 years is too long. Right. So yeah, I mean, I think there's value in reaching out because at a minimum, it lets people know that they're being paid attention to.
How often would you say an issue is brought to your attention by someone just reaching out that you weren't aware of or that the council hadn't even addressed yet? Is that something that you've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of two sort of different questions. There are things that we're going to address that says, oh, now this is maybe this, rather than touching it in 6 weeks, we need to bump that up because the community is saying, hey, look, I want you to address it now. That doesn't always mean that it gets addressed now, but it's a good impetus for me to say, hey, this is getting more playtime. Let's fast track it. And then things that I'm unaware of, I mean, it happens from time to time. And, I mean, for example, especially let's go back to traffic. I don't drive the whole city, and I don't drive it all. What I do drive, and I do drive throughout the city. We're not like some major metropolitan where it's sprawling. It's got some land mass, but it's not huge. But I can't be everywhere at every time. So to know that there's bad traffic on a side of town that I might touch only at like 2:00 in the afternoon when no one's there, like, oh, that's helpful. Or that there's a new type of venue, like a restaurant or something like that. So there's stuff that I do get made aware of through just being a city councilman and people reaching out and saying, hey, pay attention.
Good. So, I mean, really that line of questioning is intended to point out the fact that our voices do get heard by our elected officials, whether they're for or against us. When they do hear us, it does make a difference. And I kind of want to play on that theme a little bit about don't be silent, right? We're the Silent Majority Foundation, but we're speaking out. We're giving you a voice. And those that support us, we want you to have that voice. We want you to be able to express it and be able to really make that difference with your voice because it does impact those around us. And it may not be immediate, but it may take some time. But it is an impact that's worth having.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm now 5 years into this, and there are a lot of people that, I've come into contact through, and some relationships and friendships I've developed because of my position, and there is insight. I mean, I try not to make my decisions in a vacuum when I'm sitting up there. And I think generally, most elected officials, I'm not going to say all, but most at least are willing to take in the information, what their process is with it. I'm not going to say that it's changing, but at least it's there. So yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing to don't be silent.
So let's go into a little bit about our special capabilities or what makes us different or why we feel like our foundation is making a difference, primarily because we have the litigation power, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we always knew there were kind of three legs of the stool. Education, let people know what their rights are, fight for them, and hopefully, again, as we continue to morph and modify this podcast, I'm hoping that we start to have more consistent interaction where people then can consistently ask us questions, and hopefully we can get to answering them. So education and then advocating, which is either that we've taught you what your rights are or had a discussion and there's an application to your particular situation where maybe you don't need to go to court, but hey, I want to go talk to the school board about XYZ. Okay, well, what are your concerns? Let's talk about it. Help draft kind of an idea of how to communicate that. And that's the advocacy position. And then we always knew that there are times where the courts are absolutely necessary to make the changes. Sometimes they listen to us, sometimes they don't. And sometimes you can solve ahead of that, and sometimes you can't. So we thought that it was critically important to have all three legs of the stool available to us. And so, we don't just threaten action, we take action.
Right. So let's start with the first action that you did before the foundation even started. What was that first action you took?
Yeah, so I was heavily involved in the recall of Jay Inslee. I helped draft several of the 5 charges. This was in relation to his proclamations shutting the state down. I think I drafted either 2 or 3 of the 5. I argued the case in Thurston County. I was doing the legal work for free with a different organization that was moving it forward. And, that organization helped me in the sense that I had some contacts that still remain. Our friend Marshall, who I know he was working on a podcast, we did with him. So, Marshall Casey was up there, and hopefully I didn't out him there. But, we have that connection because of him. I saw Bill Vasson, who's, clapping at us. Yep. One of our good friends who was a plaintiff in that. And so we were able to build this community. And one of the important things was after we filed the charges, that's where we met Eric Marchant, who was one of our early directors. And, he and I talked, and you and he and I talked when we drove up to Olympia to file those charges. Mm-hmm. And, he had a Patriot group, and he was like, okay, well, how do I take this to the next level? And we kind of all had this thought. So we created, a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, so people can kind of invest in protecting their rights and do so with tax deductions. That's why we created this. I could have just as easily created a for-profit law firm, but I also knew that at the end of the day, if I did that, I'd be telling a lot of people no. A lot of these cases are very time and resource intensive, and it's a question of civil rights. It's not did the guy blow the red, or was he doing 42 in a 25 such that he's at fault for a car accident. I'm not saying that those cases are easy. They take time, they take experts, but there's a lot that you can draw into a very clear fact pattern. Here it's, yes, the civil rights are violated, but do you have a court that's going to accept that, right? And then if so, are they going to offer damages? And so, anyway, we met Eric, and, Eric and I, we had a chance to continually talk. We hit it off. We felt like there was a value in creating the organization. He brought Vince in. Eric and Vince were up in Snohomish County. Vince sits on Mill Creek City Council. You talk about people that are accessible to their public. I know the way that Vince and I talk about how we operate as city council members. Vince is very much like me, where just because we don't give you what you want, via your email or your inquiries, doesn't mean we're not listening, right? Like, we're still engaging and interactive with the public. And so, we brought that on and formed the foundation and decided that it was time to go. And last August, now 2 years ago, August of 21, we actually filed and created the organization. Again, we birthed a 501c3, a nonprofit, with the intent to allow people to kind of invest in their rights and to have the ability to do so in a tax deductible way. So from there, I mean, we were off running. Our very first case as an organization was Johnson versus Inslee. And that case, I mean, obviously, there's a big learning curve and there's the magic time machine that I would change things with, if I could do it again. But obviously, I don't have that time machine. If I did, I wouldn't be running a nonprofit. I'd be selling time machines.
Well, it's interesting. Johnson has followed us through this entire ordeal, right? And it continues it crosses over into cases and different issues, primarily because our major opponent is the state in this, right? And it has been, and I think it's almost poetic that Johnson continues to be that one thing that comes back to us, right?
Well, it is. I mean, and I'll be honest, every time I see it, I have kind of two very visceral reactions. Like, one is yes, this is the wrong application. I'm excited to see it here. And the second one is like, dang case, I don't want to see it again. For those who weren't here back then, Johnson v. Inslee was an amazing case, I think, both factually and legally. It was early in the pandemic. This was 2021. Like I said, August of 21. Jay Inslee, our governor, had instituted the vaccine mandate for all state workers. And Mr. Jeffrey Johnson, I know he still does follow us. Shout out to you, Jeff. Hope family's doing well. He worked for the Department of Corrections in Connell, Washington, which, for those who don't know, geographically, that's Franklin County. And, all the impacts, he resided in Franklin County. And so all the venue statutes, and venue is the question of which court is proper. There are 39 county superior courts. I mean, some are, bifurcated or truncated. So technically it's less than 39, but there are 39 counties in the state of Washington. And the question on venue is, does the case belong there? And so we looked at the factors and said, Johnson worked in Connell. He lived in Connell. I mean, everything residence-based was Connell-based. But down the road, like 6 months later, when we got a decision from the state Supreme Court, it was no, because Jay Inslee, acting as the executive of the state of Washington, made a unilateral decision in his official capacity. It belonged in Thurston County. And so with that, the case ended up in Thurston County, and we have the Johnson rule, if you will, which is, it enforces the state officer rule, which is a state officer acting in his or her official capacity is supposed to be sued in that particular area. Now, what I really wanted to do with Johnson, and I thought would have been fun if we had the resources, I don't think Jay Inslee signed it from his desk. Was he on vacation in California? I should have sued him in California. And obviously that would have gone into a whole separate debate.
Right.
But yeah, so Johnson has been used, it's been weaponized. I think that's a fair term, has been weaponized by the states to keep us out of any county other than Thurston. And to your point, I mean, we see it every pleading we bring that's not in Thurston County.
Well, the way that I see it from a non-legal perspective is that me as a citizen, I now no longer have representation from the judges that I voted myself for anything constitutional, whether it be federal or state constitutionality. It now all goes back to Thurston County, where I feel like the state is at home court advantage to the state. How am I as a citizen supposed to feel like I have any constitutional protections when the state is not only can make the rules but defend them from the judgment?
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the issue. I mean, everyone talks about or maybe not everyone, a lot of people talk about the fact that Jay Inslee in his third term has appointed an overwhelming majority, I think 80+% of our bench, our judicial bench in the state of Washington. That's problematic. But equally problematic. And look, suing the state in 1950 or 1920 or even 1970 or 80 or 90 is a different game than 2023 in the sense that if you had one or two or three or four state officers all co-located in Thurston County, you'd literally have to ship bankers boxes of documents for trials, for discovery, back then, right? And it made sense from a resource perspective to try to bring these cases there. 2023, I mean, I can pick up my phone and discovery is sent there. It is. I mean, the worst case scenario, I get a thumb drive.
Right.
Absolute worst case scenario. And realistically, to say that it belongs in Thurston County because it's difficult for the state, convenience of the witness is the term of art. It's ridiculous. I mean, these guys, quite frankly, they have access to flights, probably private jets. I mean, like the governor has WSP patrol, not just the patrol, but like the special detail for him. So it's not like he's putting himself at risk by leaving his mansion or leaving that hill. So,
well, not to mention that when we're talking about court, it's an assistant AG that's showing up. They're representing them in their capacity, and they can travel and they have the budget for it. It's not like they have a limited budget that they're working with.
Yeah, one of the other people we'll introduce you to, we've got Austin Hatcher and Karen Osborne, a couple of our other attorneys. The people that follow us have already been introduced to them, but anyone new, we'll meet them down the road. And Austin and I were talking about a case, and, we were talking about how traveling to and from, he's in Spokane, to and from Thurston County, it's a pain. But we were at a hearing in Grant County, and there wasn't just the assistant attorney general, but there was a special attorney general, meaning someone in a private law firm that showed up. And both of those guys flew down to Grant County, or I think they drove because there's really nowhere to fly into for Grant. But they had, the special assistant talked about flying into Spokane the night before, flying home, and driving to Grant County. So back to their budget, we've met this. $440 million was their request for 24. 1,100 staff, 600 attorneys, 500 staff, or maybe vice versa, 500 attorneys. Plus, as I mentioned, special assistant attorney generals. And so you look at that, and it's a true David Goliath thing, but, look, we're on the side of right. So was David. But we get this like biblical story, which is just truncated into a few chapters, right? There's a whole lot of interplay that occurred in the interim, the Johnsons of the David story, the getting bumped venue, the way that Johnson circles back and haunts us. We don't know any of that. We just get the couple of chapters of like, grab some rocks and a sling and boom, hits him with the first one. Like, it didn't play out that easily. So
we're waiting for that sling and that rock, right?
Well, I think we've got some of the tools. We're just waiting for the timing of like, he put on Saul's armor and it was too big. And there were a lot of steps in the interim that we're waiting for. And we're not, to be clear, we're not waiting for them. We're trying to make them happen. We're not, David didn't say, where's my sling? Where's my rock god? Like, go create him and drop him from an eagle, right? He had his sling, and then he went and looked for the right proper stones.
Well, and he practiced, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's, maybe these cases that we keep on coming up against that knock us down, that's our fine tuning and our practicing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to knock him off with the first stone, but yeah, he had to kill the lion. He had all his sheep herding days behind him. So,
well, we're coming up on time. We wanted to keep this relatively short, but we wanted to get the message out and update everybody on where we're at. Any quick updates or cutting edge stuff that's going on?
Yeah, the cases that are most followed right now are House Bill 1240 challenge. For anyone that circling back to Johnson, we brought a challenge to House Bill 1240, which is known as the assault weapons ban. In Grant County, we had a hearing on that, and based on the decision in Johnson, and we disagree with this, it was moved to Thurston County. Now, our options were to appeal that decision alone and never get to the merits down the road, or bring the lawsuit and let it be moved to Thurston County. So that is being actively moved to Thurston County. We're hoping that we got the file number by the end of the week at the latest, and we're going to try to fast track our preliminary injunction, or excuse me, our temporary restraining order hearing, since that's already briefed up, rather than briefing a whole new issue, which is really the same issue. If we can just bring the file, have the case heard as quickly as possible, expedite that, we want that decision from that judge. And then if that's the wrong decision, we'll look at appealing. Although we may not be able to do that with the TRO. We may have to actually brief the PI, the injunction, and go from there. But 1240 is moving. It's moved to Thurston County, and we're keeping that ball rolling so that people can get the justice they need. We saw that one of the federal courts just really, I mean, I haven't read the opinion. It sounds like he botched Bruin and had some really interesting.
If any of you want a really good analysis of a breakdown of what that judge wrote, William Kirk at Washington Gun Law, I just put out a great YouTube video explaining what went on and why that judge is particularly wrong in that ruling. And then in the Eastern District Federal Court, they're still waiting to hear.
Yeah, I want to say they're sitting on like a July date or late June date for their briefing schedule to be done. And I don't recall if they have oral arguments scheduled. So it's either they have oral arguments late June or early July, or their briefing's done, and then there will be oral arguments. And as we've seen, some of those decisions out of the Eastern District of Washington, we're sitting on one, the Brumback case, which was a challenge to last year's large capacity or greater than 10 round magazine capacity ban. We're sitting on that since we expected it before Christmas, and here we are, June 7th. So
we were in court the day before Thanksgiving in Yakima, and we still haven't heard. And that's the exact same judge.
Yeah, I think they've got Demke.
Demke. I'm pretty
sure that's who they have.
Was saying. I'm pretty sure they've got Demke. So yeah, we'll see how slow she can come out with a decision on that too.
There you go. And then, our medical freedom cases are continually moving forward. The state's trying to dismiss our challenge to the COVID-19, the Washington Medical Commission's COVID-19 position statement, which the state, in our opinion, has enforced against several doctors, saying that you basically cannot speak about COVID unless it was the proper language, right? You couldn't prescribe ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, and you couldn't use, basically the unapproved language. And so we challenged that in the Eastern District of Washington. We got Judge Rice, the other district judge up there, and the state's moved to dismiss that. Right now, he's kind of abstaining from hearing that, and we had a briefing on that. And, in our opinion, the factors required to have a federal court not hear a case that rests on state issues doesn't apply here. We have potential monetary damages for violation of civil rights. Because it's a violation of civil rights, the First Amendment, specifically free speech, we don't believe that the abstention doctrine applies. So it's going to get interesting. I mean, we're at least trying to build out, where we get bad opinions, trying to build them out and look at where we can appeal them to try to get better body of law from the upper courts.
So to that point, I mean, these things potentially can go all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, any of these cases, or all of these potentially.
Yeah.
So we got a long road ahead of us, and this takes resources and energy and people to get this done. And so, if that question that we talked about earlier, how can I help? If that question is still unanswered, what I would answer you right now is tell your friends, share this with your friends, tell them how we're fighting for your rights, your Second Amendment rights, the right to defend yourself, defend your family, to keep your freedom, the right to speak, and in the medical freedom, the right to have a doctor that's actually going to treat you, that's going to give you the answers to your own personal health, and they're not going to bow the knee to a state that's deciding how to treat your health from afar without ever seeing you, without ever talking to you, not even caring about you. And that's really what the crux of the medical freedom is that these doctors are handcuffed and not able to tell you exactly what you need because the state is prescribing them what they are supposed to treat you with.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about your ability to choose, and your doctor's ability to speak so that you have informed consent. I mean, those have been two huge words throughout the entirety of the pandemic, and specifically pre-pandemic. Then they got washed under the rug as though they didn't exist. Oh, you're going to take this. What is in it? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's what your employer says you're going to have. That's what the government says you have to have.
Right.
So.
So great. I know we gotta keep it short. We gotta cut off, but it was great to be able to do this. We hope we can do more of this. If you have any questions, comments, please let us know how we can do this better. If there's anything you need to know or want to see from us, please feel free to let us know. Comment in the comment section. And anything else, Pete?
No, I mean, just continually. We appreciate your support. I mean, where you have the ability to donate, please do so. smfjb.org. It's not an accident that smfjb.org is our website. Where you can, please donate. Where you can't, certainly your prayers are welcome and absolutely needed. They definitely buoy us up, and tell your friends about the work that we're doing. It may not be the home run that everyone wants to see, but we're consistently making contact and getting on base, and so we'll talk about how the landscape changed and is changing, through our work as we continue the series.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete.
Absolutely. Thank you.